We're now going to talk about amps. There are two different kind of amps. There's combo amps and there's stack amps. Usually stacks are more expensive and used for touring and things for stage. They're not generally used for practice. I use mine for practice because after playing for a while I've accumulated some more of the things that I used to play, and I've got more equipment over time, so now I've got all this stuff and I've actually sold a lot of my combo amps. I have actually no more bass combo amps. But there are combo amps, which is one single amp. Everything is built into it. There's all the EQ, everything is modded and built right into it. Here I have a combo amp. This is a guitar combo amp, but it's generally the same idea. It's got a speaker, sometimes there are two. It's got knobs on it. Everything is built inside of one object. So I carry this, I plug it into the wall, and I plug my instrument into it. Everything is done. You can put some effects in the way, which we'll talk about later, but this is generally just the amp. It's got distortion in it already. This is the guitar version, of course. A lot of bass ones are not going to have distortion. It's got reverb on it. This is what this amp specializes in. But what a general combo amp will have is EQ, which is bass, middle, and treble, and volume. You might also get lucky, you might get presence in there, you might get a bunch of different things, because all different kinds of amps have all different kinds of features. You have to go onto the sites and look for what you want in your bass amp. Or if you want a sound where you want a lot of grit, you want a lot of a rock tone, you're probably going to want to get one with distortion if you can find a bass combo amp that has distortion. If you can't, you might have to get an effects pedal. Again, we're going to talk about that later. Now, combo amps are generally used so you can practice. They're not made for shows. You shouldn't go out and play shows that are huge with combo amps. But by the time you get to shows, you might have a bigger amp. Combo amps are generally made for home practice or maybe band practice in a garage somewhere. You can play shows with combo amps. I started out with combo amps, a smaller one, and then I moved to a bigger one, and then I moved to a stack amp eventually. And they're quite nice. They're convenient. They're one carry, and you can plug right into it. And there's all these features that are built in, which a lot of people are fine with. That you're set completely on that. Now I've got a review of a combo amp up that you guys can go check out, and that's a small little practice bass amp. It's an Ibanez bass amp that is about 15 watts. You're looking generally from 10 watts to about 25 to maybe 30 watts as a practice amp. Something to start out with is going to be a combo amp, a little small one that you can play in your room. It's going to give you plenty of sound, and some of them have, actually all of them have headphone jacks now so that you can play by yourself. And those are really nice to start out with. Now if you're going to be joining a band, if you're going to be playing in a band at this point in your bass journey, you're probably playing in a band or you're probably playing with other people, then you're going to want an amp that'll sound right in the mix with the rest of the band. So if you have an amp that will sound good with just a guitar, that's 35 watts. That's completely fine. 35 is great. Anything from 25 to 100, that's completely fine. When you start adding drums to the mix, things like that are going to drown you out. And as a bass player, you really cannot be drowned out. You should be felt. If no one can hear you, then that's tolerable, but people need to know that you're there. They need to be able to feel the rhythm of the bass. Now, that's not to say that somebody that doesn't know anything about music is going to know exactly what that is. It's just that the flow of the song has to go with the bass. Now, if your amp does not sufficiently provide the sound for you, you might need to get an amp with more power. The break-off from a combo amp to a stack amp is overlapped, meaning there are some combo amps that you can use on stage that are very good on sound and they're convenient to carry. And then there are some stack amps that are actually a lot less on power than some combo amps. So it's basically like this. There's the low end of this of the combo and the high end of the combo, and then right here there's the low end of the stack and the high end of the stacks. The head and the cabinet, those are what the stacks are. You might start with a 25 watt amp, which is completely fine to play with, and maybe you might be able to get away with having that amp against a drum set. But when it comes to when you want to play shows, you want to be well prepared. You want to be able to be heard. In a show, you might be mic'd. You might go direct in, depending on if your amp has a connection or not. The thing is, you have to be able to hear yourself on the stage. Your drummer needs to be able to hear you. The rest of the band needs to be able to hear you. You need to be heard on stage in order for you to sound good and for that to be amplified to the crowd. It's not going to work any if the crowd can just hear you and you guys can't hear you, because when you're sitting there and you're playing your instrument and you have your your sound in your head, you might not be playing the notes the way that they're supposed to be played. The drummer can't hear you, so he's not matching with you, and you guys aren't going together, so what the crowd is hearing is complete crap at the time. So you need to get an amp that's not just loud enough for the crowd to hear, but something that you guys can hear on stage. It kind of works backwards. When you're sitting in a venue, or when you're standing in a venue, rather, when you're playing, you are not heard from stage. You're heard from the PA. A lot of the subwoofers take what the bass is going to be sounding. A lot of the amps are mic'd into the PA speakers, and then the vocals come from the overhead PA speakers. And those are usually what reach the crowd the most. There's a sweet spot where the people are actually supposed to be laid out, and that's the middle section where people usually have mosh pits, and that's where they can hear your music the most. People in front of the stage or right next to the stage are going to be able to hear you pretty well in just the amps, but they're still going to be getting most of what the PA is doing. People in the back are going to hear a mix of both. But there's a sweet spot which is going to sound the best, which is purely just the PA speakers. What you're playing on stage is not going to be heard. It's just going to be what's amplified from the stage. Meaning everything that's coming from your amp is not going to reach them. It's going to reach you. Everything coming from your amp into the PA is going to reach the crowd. So you need to get something loud enough that they're going to be able to hear you on the stage. And your singer needs to go with you, your drummer needs to go with you, the guitarist and you will have to match. So it's kind of a cycle. It's a backward cycle and a forward-facing cycle. The drummer needs to match with you, or you need to match with the drummer. The guitarist has their own sound with the lead, and then the guitar. If there's two, one has to go with the rhythm, or if there's just one, they have to play their own. They have to provide their own rhythm. The guitarist is going to be listening to the drummer, who in turn is listening to you, but you're also listening to the drummer. And the singer is going to be either listening to the guitar for the melody or for the bass. So everything works in a group, and it goes this way and the other way. One listens to the other, but the other listens to one, and it's very essential that you are heard on stage and in practice. So your amp needs to be loud enough. Now those are combo amps. There are bigger combo amps, and I've got another review of a combo amp, which is an Ampeg amp, which is a big one, sufficient enough for stage use. I used it on stage for a very long time, and I really liked it. I thought that it was one of the coolest amps that I've ever used. It was a big 15-inch speaker. It gave me 100 watts of power. It had a tube in it, and it sounded very good. Now let's talk about stack amps. What are stack amps? Well, a stack amp is basically a cabinet or cabinets with a head. And a head is generally just what the amp is. The head comes with no speaker. It's just a basic receiver, and it has all the settings and things that you have to have in it, but you need to connect that head to a speaker in order for sound to come out. These are generally more professional, except for there are trade-offs. A lot of amp companies make starter stacks. They like to make starter stacks that are made specifically for stage use, some that are made for practice. How you practice with a stack amp is basically being able to move the head around. If you want just the sound of the head, you're like, this is a good amp, but I need a really good speaker that goes with it. I need a good set of speakers. Then you're able to move these things around. It's basically taking an amp and the speakers, separating them, and being able to mix and match depending on the wattage in it. You can't just use any amp with any speaker. You have to look at the RMS, you have to look at things like that, meaning these are more intermediate to advanced level amps. So what usually starts with a stack amp is just the head. You might want to go out and probably buy a head. There are two types of heads. There are regular heads, and there are ones that are rack mount, made for racks, which I'm going to show you in a second. The rack mount heads are supposed to be placed inside of a rack for protection, and the regular heads can be placed inside of racks, but normally they're not. You have the amps with all the settings on them, and then you have cabinets. There are different types of speaker cabinets. There are 4x10 cabinets, meaning there are 4 10-inch speakers. There's one 15 cabinets, which is one big 15-inch speaker. I've got one that's got two 15 inches, and they vary on different types of speakers. Different types of speakers give you different types of sound. Now, a stack amp is going to be a part of two things: a head and a cabinet, like I said earlier. This is a speaker cabinet full of speakers. You're not seeing the whole thing. There's two speakers right here. You might be able to see the circles. There's one right here, one right there. And there's two right below them, making them 4 speakers, and there's a tweeter in the middle. Now that's 4x10 inch speakers. That's 4 speakers that are 10 inches. And this gives me a really nice mid-range type of tone, which is punchy and it's really great, and gives me a good bottom end as well. And I'll show you a speaker cabinet that has more bottom end in a minute. This is the head. Now, the head connects to these speaker cabinets. This one is a 450 watt head, so the speaker cabinet that I connect to has to be at least 400 watts, and that's pushing it. It has to be able to handle at least 400 watts. Now, for safety, for a good sounding amp, and for you to be able to use this to its full features, you have to find one that is at about 600 watts at 4 ohms, not 8 ohms, at 4 ohms. Those speaker cabinets are usually a little bit more expensive. This is about 350 watt handling cabinet. So it means I can't turn this amp all the way up, or else it'll blow the speakers. It's not good for it. So I have a different cabinet, which is a seismic audio, which you can click right on the amp itself to get to, and it'll take you to seismic audio. And that's a 215 amp, that a 215 cabinet that I'm using. That actually can handle the power for this amp. Now, the amp is going to have many different features on it. It's going to have EQ. Now, I have a video on bass EQ. If you click on the amp, it'll take you to that video. Once you get there, it'll show you everything that you need to know about how to set up your amp, things like that, from basic combo amps all the way to stack amps. These are EQ settings for any amplifier that you will have for bass, and it'll give you a general idea of what they are. So the head, which is inside of a rack, which I talked about, this is what the rack is. This outer shell is a rack. Actually, just this receiver is the actual head. If I take this out, it leaves this gator case that I have, and that is something I had to buy separate, and I had to put this head inside there for protection reasons. I've got another slot that I can probably put like a tuner in or something else that I want. I haven't really put anything else there, so I just use this for cable storage and things like that. This is the back of the amp. As you can see, there are many different things that I can do. I can plug it into a DI, meaning I can plug this into the front of the house PA system by itself, auxiliary in for other receivers. I got a tuner send in, foot switch if I want. I can have an effects loop. I can use Nutrix speak-on cables, or I can use basic speaker cables. And one of the things you have to remember is you have to use speaker cables. Do not use an instrument cable to connect from your amp to the cabinet. And if you come down here, you'll see I have a tweeter connection that I can adjust. And I've got 2 places that I can put either another speaker cabinet into, or just the amp itself. It's got a basic feature of anything else. I mean, it's got a plug, and it's got the plug-in for the cabinet. Other than that, everything else is pretty straightforward. When it comes to speaker cabinets and amp heads, you're going to run into something that's called ohms, and it goes by Ohm's law. Explaining Ohm's law takes a little bit of knowledge of electricity, takes some resistance knowledge, things like that. But basically what you have to understand is the way that you think about ohms, you kind of have to think a little bit backwards. The more ohms, the more resistance, the less power you get. If you picture a garden hose, and you turn on the garden hose, and you let the water flow through just by itself, and it just flows through and comes out of the other end of the hose, that is the current. If you place your thumb over the end of the hose, and you can feel the water pressure rising, that pressure is basically volts. Moving your thumb out of the way makes some water come out, but some water stay in, and that is resistance. Ohms is basically resistance. The less resistance, the more power you get. Now, a lot of people might think that, all right, so why isn't everything just 2 ohms, which is typically the lowest amount of ohms you can get in an amp or cabinet. And the reason is a lot of amps and cabinets work differently for different purposes. The Ampeg 810 cabinet, or any 810 cabinet for that matter, works in 8 or 4 ohms. It doesn't go to 2 ohms. It can. There are ways that you can make it, and there are ways you can get it that way, but normally if you go on Ampeg's site, the 810 cabinet that you are going to see on their site is going to be 8 or 4 ohms, and it runs at about 800 watts, 800 watts RMS, 1200 maximum at peak, meaning that you can run essentially any cabinet. You don't have to really turn it up all the way either, and you'll get more than enough power. Now, amps and cabinets are rated at different ohms, meaning you might have an amp, like I have here. This is an amp head, and below the amp head, you can't see it, is the speaker cabinet. And I have a 410 speaker cabinet, 4 10-inch speakers inside of an enclosure, which is a speaker cabinet. And this is an 8 ohm cabinet. The amp is at 4 ohms. It's 450 watts at 4 ohms, meaning if I plug this amp head into any cabinet or cabinets that add up to or are 4 ohms, that I get 450 watts out of it turned up all the way. You still do get clipping. What you want is more headroom. You want to get a speaker cabinet that is 4 ohms, but that is rated at higher than 450 watts in order to turn this thing up all the way without it clipping. If you get one that's at 4 ohms at 400 watts, let's say there's a cabinet that you get that is 4 ohms at 400 watts, and this is 4 ohms, this gives off 450 watts at 4 ohms, you don't want to turn it up all the way. You can only go up to about 400 watts, meaning you can turn it up just around 12 o'clock, a little bit past that, and you'll get some good power out of it. A lot of people, what they do is they like to pair cabinets, and they think that you're going to get louder if you pair cabinets. That isn't all the way true. When you pair a cabinet, when you put 2 cabinets underneath one amp head, you are gonna have two options to wire them. One is called parallel, the other is called series. Parallel is wiring them both into the amp head. We'll talk about multiple cabinets, which is series and parallel, in a different video. Now we're going to look at a singular cabinet going into a singular head. One cabinet going into one head at any ohms is going to determine how much power you're going to get out of it. Meaning if I have a 4 ohm head, which I do, and an 8 ohm cabinet, which I do, and if I just pair them by themselves, then it's going to give me less power than the amp can actually provide, meaning I can run it up around 200 watts. This cabinet can give me an RMS of 200 watts. So when I run this head, I'm actually essentially getting 200 watts of peak power, which is completely fine for a lot of shows that I play and is more than perfect for the practice that I do. But if I want to play larger venues, or if I want to play louder than I can, or bring this amp to its actual maximum potential, I have to get a 4 ohm cabinet or 2 8 ohm cabinets. Again, I'm going to talk about multiple cabinets in a different video. A 4 ohm cabinet that is at 450 watts or above 450 watts. Ideally above 450 watts, meaning if I have a cabinet which is rated at 500 watts at 4 ohms, that means I can put this head in there at 450 watts, this 450 watt head at 4 ohms, in that cabinet, which is 500 watts at 4 ohms, and turn it up as much as I want without getting any clipping, ideally. So a lot of people like to do that. They like to have one cabinet and one head, and they like to get a head with 4 ohms, or 8 ohms, or 2 ohms, however many ohms there are, and getting a cabinet that will correspond with the ohm rating of the head, and have one that is rated more than the actual head is, meaning, like I said, this is a 450 watt head at 4 ohms. I can get a cabinet that is a 4 ohm cabinet, but I want to essentially get a cabinet that is rated higher than 450 watts so that I can have this headroom between the peaks, meaning that I can turn it up as much as I want, get all the power I want out of it, mic the speaker cabinet, make portability easy, turn it up as loud as I want, and be efficiently as loud as possible. So you have all these different options that you want to run. A lot of people get 8 ohm cabinets, they pair with 4 ohms, and they get half the power basically. And a lot of people like to mix and match, and there's all these kind of things. But basically, Ohm's law is what you have to look at. You have to look at the resistance, basically. That is what the ohms are, is resistance. And you correspond however you can, meaning if you have an 8 ohm head, you probably want to get an 8 ohm speaker cabinet. If you run more ohms, or essentially less ohms, if you run, let's say this is an 8 ohm speaker head, and I run it into a 4 ohm cabinet, you can essentially be running more juice out of this thing than it can actually give, and you can overheat it, and it can actually almost set a fire sometimes, depending on what kind of resistors you have in there. But you could damage, and you possibly would damage your amp. So a lot of people say, well, what if I have an 8 ohm head which runs at maybe 400 watts, and I get a 4 ohm cabinet which runs at 500 watts? Wouldn't that be completely fine? That would not be fine. Running the 8 ohm head into something that is less than 8 ohms is going to damage the head. In multiple cabinets, which we're going to talk about again in a later video, or in a singular cabinet. Whatever your equal of ratings are going to be, it has to be 8 or above, meaning 8, 16 ohm cabinets, I haven't really seen much of them. So you probably want to pair an 8 ohm cabinet with an 8 ohm head, or however you will set your multiple speakers to equal out to 8 ohms, and run that into there. It's very important that you look at this. It's extremely important. Same thing with 4. If I have this 4 ohm head, I need to get a cabinet that is 8 ohms, 4 ohms, or anything above those two numbers. I cannot get a 2 ohm cabinet and run it into, or run this into that 2 ohms, because it doesn't give me enough resistance, and it runs more power than it essentially is allowed to give out, and can set your amp ablaze. So that is what essentially the two types of amps are. There is the small combo amps to the bigger combo amps, and then there's the small stacks to the larger stacks. And what they do is basically, like I said, they overlap, meaning that you will have your small practice combos all the way to ones that you can actually gig with. Then you'll have some speaker cabinets and heads that are small enough to practice with, but are essentially the same thing as a bigger combo amp. If you have a small 8 ohm, let's say an 8 ohm head, which is 250 watts, running into an 8 ohm cabinet, which will give you 250 watts, you can get a combo amp, a bigger combo amp, for 350 watts above for the same price. And you don't even have to carry a head and a cabinet. So it does overlap. If you're looking at a very cheap head and cabinet that gives you about 300 watts maximum, you might want to just look at some combo amps that you can gig with, which are a lot bigger than that for the same price. If you're going to be running into speaker cabinets and heads, you're going to want to jump up the price. You're going to want to start looking for one of these when it comes to over 400 to 500 watts to even 600 watts. When you're looking at something above 400 watts, then you might want to jump into one of these two configurations, because what will end up happening is this will be essentially be cheaper at 400 plus watts than some of the combos that I've seen. After a while, you also want, like, maybe you just like the cabinet but you want to pair different kind of heads with it. Like, I like these speakers and I love the company, but I don't like Ampeg heads. A lot of people say that. I don't like Ampeg heads. I've actually met a few people. They're like, I'm more of a PV guy. Like I have here, a PV head with the Ampeg cabinet. When you have preferences like that and you have the idea of getting more than around 400 watts, then you might want to move to a stack configuration. Other than that, combo amps will work from practice all the way to gigging even. If you're playing larger venues, I would look at trying to find a way to get a head and cabinet that is appropriate for the venue that you're going to be at, because a lot of combo amps just don't cut it that much. Again, like I said, if you're going to get a 400 watt head system, it's a lot cheaper sometimes to get a stack than get a combo amp that is rated at the same. So you're going to want to look at your options. So amps, which one is right for you? I can never answer that question for each individual person that asks me that. There's just no way. Even if you tell me I'm a rock musician, I want to play hard rock, my tone for hard rock and your tone for hard rock might be completely different things. I'm more of a Rush tone. Like I like Geddy Lee's tone. You might like more of Nickelback tone. I don't know. However you want to look at rock or hard rock. I don't think Rush is hard rock really, but same way of looking at things. So you want to look at your options like I've showed you in this video the best I possibly can, and then you want to jump to your conclusion after looking at your price range and which one is right for your price range. If you guys have any questions on amps and or EQ or anything like that, please ask me in the comments below and I will answer them as much as I can. If you guys want the latest on what I'm doing, a lot of people like to know what kind of videos I'm coming up with, if their requests have been handled or not. On Twitter is the best way to find me. I'm going to show you somewhere here how to get to that Twitter. You guys can go to my main channel page. There's a link to my Twitter. Follow me. It's as simple as that, just following me on Twitter, getting the latest. It is the easiest way I can communicate with you guys. I don't really run too much on Facebook when it comes to my channel on YouTube, anything else. So if you guys want to know what I'm doing, know what I'm up to, video-wise or anything else, Twitter is the best way to follow me. Follow me on that. Thank you for watching, and please come back next time.